Daisy, try it now. It's probably working. Hey, Michelle, welcome in. Casey, welcome in. How are you? Katie Koss, welcome in. Oh, Bonnie, I am glad you came across my live again, too. It's good to see you again. Hey, Eddie, how are you, sir? Welcome in, brother. Oh my god, tonight is going to be a freaking nightmare if this keeps up. Good lord. Alright, let me give it about 2 more minutes. Baby boy names. Wow. Well, if my ex-wife and I had had a baby boy, we would have named him Ian. He would have been Ian Lyle Thompson. Lyle being my middle name, my grandfather's middle name, and my great-grandfather. It was his first name. You have not missed anything. I have not even started reading yet. I was just dealing with some technical difficulties here. TikTok has booted me off twice. And, yeah. Oh, didn't even turn my sign on. It's better than nothing. That's what they say, good enough for government. Good enough for government worth. I think it's just a technical issue, Janie. That's what I think it is. I seem to have fumbled the ball across the board tonight, so I didn't even know what I was going to read until about a couple of hours ago. It's been a repeat of Friday. But hey, Rita, how are you? Thank you guys for the shares and Gotham for a boy. Huh. Never would have thought of that. Might be because I'm old. So I did get some great news yesterday. Yesterday evening, my best friend had her baby. 7 pounds, 13 ounces, and 21 inches long. Mama and baby are doing wonderfully, and I gotta be honest with you guys. Yeah, I'm in love. She is amazing. She's perfect. Her name is Evangeline. Evie, for short. But she looks just like her mom. She's got her big sister's cheeks. I didn't think I would get this emotional over a baby that's not mine. But my bestie is the best friend I've ever had in my life. And I know I've talked about this before, but she saved my life. And yeah. She's perfect. I mean, I loved my kids, and I felt the same way when they were born. little more intensely. But this little one is... she's going to have a life full of love. That's really all you can ask for, you know. If I get permission, which I am waiting, I did ask. If, oh, Pamela, don't you worry. I warned my best friend that it's probably a good thing that she lives 3,000 miles away, because if I was there and living close, I would be such a pain in the ass right now. I would be loving on the two of them so much. And she's got a great dad too. You know, he's a great guy. He's a big, tough former Marine, but he's also a giant teddy bear. And he has taken on the role of father to my best friend's two other kids who are not biologically his, but they call him Dad. And he's a wonderful guy. And this is their one child that they're going to have together. And yeah, I can't wait. I cannot wait to meet her in person. Also got some other wild news. My 18-year-old daughter, who lives in Liverpool, got engaged. It feels weird. I am happy for her. More than anything. He's a great guy. Though I have not met him in person. My ex-wife and her husband both love him and adore him. And from what I have heard, he takes care of her. She got sick last week, and he came over every day, made sure she ate, made her food, held her hand while she was in the bathroom, puking, and when she needed to go to the clinic, he took her. And doesn't ask for anything in return. He's just a good kid. And of course I did tell him that while I can't get a shovel and garbage bags on the plane, I can buy them when I get there. So but he seems like an easygoing kid. He's a gamer. Over in the UK, maybe that's like the clinic is sort of like urgent care here in the States. But that's what they refer to it. I like to think I set a good example, and yeah, I won't pat myself on the back too hard, but. But I do believe she picked a good one. Smart kid. He's going to university for animation. Fully supports her desire to go to university for forensic psychology. He's respectful. His parents have been together for 20 plus years. And according to my youngest daughter, they adore her. They're just all around good people. So hopefully I get to meet him this Christmas, but we shall see. Anyway, that's not why you guys are here. So let's get started. Maybe yes, in fact I do, and I am glad that you found us. I read, do live reading 4 nights a week. Sunday, Monday are generally family friendly, chapter books, stuff like that. Next weekend, I am letting everybody know now. Next weekend, I will be doing next weekend on Sunday, we'll be doing an evening of picture books. I do have some messages that I need to send out to let some people know, let a couple people know about that, so they can bring the little ones with them. I've had a couple of little ones that actually requested stories. One in particular is young lady by the name of Marley who requested Llama Llama Red Pajama. So I love reading to kids, so guess what? She's getting Llama Llama Red Pajama. But we'll be reading some of my favorites. Corduroy was one that was also requested. I'll be doing that one. Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. Crazy Mama, I have a copy of Rainbow Fish. Come on. What kind of father do you think I am? I'll be reading at least one Dr. Seuss. I will be reading... there is another book that I have to get the title of that I'll be reading that was actually requested. I'll be reading a couple other of my favorites by the author's name is Kevin Hankes. One is Lily's Purple Plastic Purse, and the other one is Chrysanthemum. That's really it's going to be such a fun night, and it's going to be great. The Giving Tree. You are speaking of the Shel Silverstein book. Is that correct? Chrysanthemum is one of my all-time favorites. And if you've never read Lily's Purple Plastic Purse, it's by the same author. It has a wonderful message. It's one that I've gifted. What the hell? It's one that I've gifted several times. Janie, that one is actually on the list. That one is one that I will be reading. It's actually probably going to be my closer because it's relatively emotional. But our very own moderator, who actually isn't here tonight, Tessa Vale, she requested Where the Wild Things Are, which is another one of my favorites. Some that I am considering that I haven't decided yet. One of my all-time favorites is I do have some Frog and Toad. I don't know if I'll be doing those, but we'll see. Mike Mulligan and his Steam Shovel was one of my favorites when I was little. Yes, I'm old. Another one, what was the other one? Edward Fuddwupper Fibbed Big. That's a more recent one that I loved reading my kids. Wisteria. Oh, that's beautiful. That's actually really beautiful. Red Chrysanthemum. That's amazing. So appropriate. Puff the Magic Dragon. Ooh. So the story of Puff the Magic Dragon, that particular illustrated book that they came out with not too long ago, was one of my youngest daughter's favorites. And for her birthday this year, because I couldn't be there, I actually recorded myself reading it and produced a video with all of the pages from the book. And she cried, I cried. Yeah, a whole lot of crying done. But that's one of my favorites. So that will be happening this coming Sunday, and there will be more about that. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. We actually read the book a couple weeks ago, and everybody loved it. And that's such a fun book for me as a voice actor. It's such a fun book to do because of all of the goofy voices. See, you say cookies, and I'm thinking If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, which is a great book. I have another one called Moose Stash, which is about a moose with a giant mustache that he can't seem to change. That he can't seem to. Janie, I actually did the Boxcar Children not too long ago. If you want to see my readings of those, they are up on my Tubes of You. Same username, UndeadPapa. But yeah, I have those all archived up there, the lives that I did. But I've done Boxcar Children, Wind in the Willows, Phantom Toll Booth, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, James and the Giant Peach. We did BFG a couple weeks ago. So, yeah, it's Tubes of You. I get in trouble if I say YouTube. TikTok has this thing about sending people off the app. They get very stingy about it. So I try not to say the actual words. But yes, the Tubes of You. Bridge to Terabithia is up there, as well as Charlotte's Web, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. Yeah, if you want to watch a 51-year-old man cry his eyes out, go watch my reading of the end of Bridge to Terabithia. That was rough. A beautiful book, but it is so rough. Yeah, same name. Just drop the VO, because I know on here I'm UndeadPapa VO, but over there it's just UndeadPapa. But I have... Yeah, Pig Latin might be a useful... Mrs. Frisbee is that is one of my all-time favorites, along with Charlotte's Web. Doesn't require as much crying as Charlotte's Web, but yeah. I know you did, Kat. I know you did. But I'm glad I did it. I don't regret it. But it is a beautiful story, and it's such difficult to read. It's such a difficult read at the end. But I did talk a little bit about this last on Friday, that some of my energy will be directed to putting people to the other site, Tubes of You, the Tubes You. Biggest reason is because TikTok's algorithm, we love TikTok and we love the TikTok shop, is so unpredictable. And this is actually something I'm trying to build into. I'm trying to build into something that I can do for a living, because I love it. I love doing this so much that if I could do this for a living, I could be happy for the rest of my life. And I know that maybe that sounds crazy, but it's just, this is a passion of mine. And I truly want to make that happen. And unfortunately, YouTube's distribution not YouTube, but TikTok's distribution is so rough and so unpredictable that it's hard to know. Like, I had one of my biggest growth months ever last month. I went into this month thinking, wow, this is going to be amazing. And this month, as far as growth is concerned, has become a turd. I mean, I'm barely going to make, Michelle, it is UndeadPapa. Pretty much same everywhere. If you want something really funny, go into AI mode on Google search and type in "who is UndeadPapa." It is so cool. It is so cool. But it lists all my social medias on there as well, which is kind of neat, and it gives you a little bit of an idea of who I am, and it's actually rather accurate, which I think is kind of cute. So the Tubes has been far more consistent and predictable with growth. I started over there with 60 subscribers, and I'm now on January, and I'm now sitting at 287. So it doesn't sound a lot when you look at my following count over here, which is just over 21,000. But growth over time it's also been more consistent. It doesn't plateau the way it does here. So it's, but I'm never going to, just to make this clear, I am never going to abandon live disconnected. Son of a biscuit. Come on. Cannot reconnect. Trying to reconnect now. There it goes. And this is another thing. This happens quite a bit. Yeah. So it's I'm back again. I should probably get started reading. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing is, there it goes again. There it goes again. Freaking heat. Did it again. No, Yanni, it's not just you. It's everything. It's TikTok in general. Let's see. See if I got a. Yeah, I have. So I have an app that attaches to a site called Down Detector, And, oh, somebody just subscribed over on the tubes. Thank you. I appreciate you. Yeah. Okay, so I was given permission. I'm so excited to show this to you guys because she is so freaking cute. I was given enthusiastic permission. That being said, bear with me. Of course it did, morning. Of course it did. Well, Janie, I appreciate you over there. You know, that one of the nice things about the tubes is, so here's the thing. Not everybody has a TikTok account, regardless of what TikTok might want you to believe. But I don't know anybody that doesn't have a tubes account. And, you know, people, there's a lot of things that you could do over there that you cannot do here. Oh, thank you, Pizza Monster. I appreciate you. Just search for UndeadPapa. You'll see the face, the same icon that I use here is over there. If you look for the lives, you'll see my goofy looking face over there as well. And you just subscribe. If you have a YouTube account, you just subscribe. There, I said the word again. I said that dirty word. Anyway, I am going to show you guys. She is so cute. Absolutely perfect, baby. And that's her. And I'll bring it up over on. I'll add the source over there too. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted. So you should be able to see it in both spots. She's perfect. She is absolutely perfect. Her name is Evangeline Willow. I won't give the last name, but I am just so in love with that face. You know, yesterday, my best friend called me on a video call, and she's like, "Do you want to meet baby?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So she positioned the phone so that, like, the screen was right in front of the baby's face, and so I could see my best friend in the background, and I'm talking right to her, and what's funny is you can see her little eyes looking at the screen as I move, and like she hears my voice, and I'm sorry, but babies can smile. Newborn, I don't care what anybody says. Don't argue with me. I will not be having it. Newborn babies can smile as far as I'm concerned. And she let out a little smile, and she just the little baby squeak, and she is extremely healthy. Yeah. But I am absolutely in awe of that little face. This combined with my youngest getting engaged, I probably an honorary uncle. We haven't actually officially declared it, but I would certainly take the title. Yeah. This is my best friend's baby. Yeah. Yeah, she's quite something. My best friend is one of the best human beings I've ever met in my life. And some of you know, I'll kind of recount the story. So back during COVID, I got on I got onto TikTok for the first time. And shortly after that, I was actually promoting my artwork. And I wasn't doing voice acting at the time. And my best friend is an artist. Very, very, very talented. And we just connected through the art community. And she is also someone who survived a very horrific domestic violence incident that nearly took her from the world. 4 centimeters. Doctor told her that 4 centimeters in one direction or the other, we'd have lost her before I even got a chance to meet her. And we are the most unlikely of friends, let alone best friends. She lives in Vancouver, Washington State, right across the river from Portland, if you know where that is. She's 15 years younger than me. She's got 2 little kids. No, little, actually. The oldest is 14. She's got 2 kids from her previous marriage. When I met her, he was being sentenced to prison. She's got a great partner. He's a wonderful guy. And we get along extremely well, and he just wholeheartedly accepts my friendship with her. So back in 2023, I had experienced some setbacks with my mental health related to some relationships that had dissolved over the last few years prior to that. And in September of that year, I almost took an exit. Be straight up honest with you. But as I'm sitting there, I was in a empty, big empty parking lot at the local mall. Now, if I decided to do anything, nobody would have found me until it was too late. But as I'm sitting in my car, spiraling, having the worst breakdown of my entire life, a little voice in my head was like, call her, call her, call her. So I picked up my phone instead of the other thing I had in my hand, and I called her. She spent 4.5 hours on the phone with me. 4.5 hours. Wouldn't let me go until she knew I was okay. Kept asking me, are you sure you don't want to go somewhere? Go to the hospital. And at the time I was single dadding it with my 2 kids. But she stayed in communication with me even after she got off the phone. And I went to therapy after that. But she stood by me as my friend she continues to this day. And last year she came out for my birthday when I turned 50. She spent a whole week out here. Traveled 3,000 miles just to spend a week with me. Those of you that don't know or haven't seen it, I have a tattoo that we got that day. Little rubber ducky. There's a story behind it, but I won't tell that tonight. We both got it that day. We got one that day. Mine is on my inside of my arm. Hers is on her ankle. And I'm still here. Big part because of her. And I thank her every day that she saved my life, because she did. She absolutely saved my life. And one one of the things that those of you that come back live after live regularly know that I'm very big on kindness. One of the things is lead with kindness, because you never know what someone else is going through. And something as simple as a hello, as a smile, as just holding space with that person for a few minutes can save their life. That's what happened to me. And if you're struggling, and I mean this sincerely, you are not alone. Didn't really intend for this live to get so deep, but I am telling you, you are not alone. And I'm glad you're here. Because you being here makes this experience better for all of us. And I'm pretty sure all of my regulars would back me up on that. You're welcome, Marcy. You know, if you have moments where you don't think you matter, Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you come into this space, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You sit with me for a couple of hours and listen to a story. And I'm telling you, you matter. You matter to me. You matter to everybody else in this room. Don't ever doubt that. So when I get comments that people say, I had a comment once, somebody said, "Thank you for helping me stay alive tonight." It's when I realized that being a storyteller is more than just sitting here and telling stories. It's about sharing space. It's about sitting around the campfire and just being together. I say this all the time, but I know, we all know that the world is nuts right now. And we don't do politics in here. That's a hard and fast rule. I'll shut it down real quick if that happens. But when you're in this space, I don't care what your politics are. I don't care what you identify as, what your pronouns are. I do care. But in this space, we're all just human beings. That's all we are. And if you break it down, we all want the same thing. Can't see my face. Oh, well, yeah, because that's... You're looking at a baby. Look at the baby. Just look at the baby. All right, fine. There's my face. My face. There's my face. My face. My face. Thanks, Buford. You being here regularly, Crazy Mama? That's important. Oh, Mel, that's beautiful. Sounds like my grandfather. My grandfather is the man that taught me how to be a man. A real man. You know, the idea that real men teach and pass on their knowledge. Real men lift up, not break down. That real men are measured not by their achievements, but by how they treat other people, especially those that can do nothing for them. I always say if I can be half the man that he was, it'll have been a victory. But like I said, when you're here, you matter. I mean, you matter when you're not here too, but you matter. You matter to me. You matter to the other people. I have seen so much wonderful in this community. Same here, Eddie. Same here. I have seen so many beautiful things happen in chat. Somebody says, "Hey, I'm having a rough week," and everybody stops and takes care of that person. And everybody can say, you built this community. I laid the brick, the first row. You guys have helped me lay down the rest. And part of why I'm so frustrated with the growth on this app and the inconsistency is, I want to make a career. I want to make a living out of this. But I also want more people to come in here and just exist with us for a little while. Oh, Mel, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I mean that. And it's moments like this. It's the fact that we have inside jokes like, I got the gym jams, Or you guys make fun of me for going. And that's why on my worst days when I don't want to come in here and do this, I come in here and do it anyway. Oh, Karen. All right. Well, if you just joined, I want you to know that next Sunday, I will be doing our picture book night. There's been so many great suggestions. I might stretch it over Sunday and Monday. So if Marley can't make Sunday, I will save Llama Llama Red Pajama for Monday or vice versa. Yeah, Mel, there's part of what doing this does is it brings back that nostalgia and lets people relive things. I've had people tell me that, that they're grateful they found my live streams because they never had a dad to read to them. Breaks my heart. But I am glad that I can fill that role, at least for a couple of hours at night. Yeah, Janie, I probably should. I got off on a little bit of went down a rabbit hole there. Thank you for reminding me that I still have a job to do, because, that's why you guys come here. You're welcome, Pamela. And just the biggest reason I try to be open and real is because maybe somebody needs it. Maybe somebody needs to hear that they're not alone. And if that's the case and they stick around, mission accomplished. Now, I've said it before, I'm not trying to change the world with kindness. Jasmine, it's one that I get requested and often enough that I may do it. But we shall see. But I can't promise yet, but with the ding to turn the page. I could make that I could do that for the storybook night. I could do that. Oh, lovely. Well, Karen, I look forward to it. I look forward to it. Yeah, so let's get started. All right, Pizza Monster, no problem. Well, it's kind of like, maybe I can affect my little corner of it, you know? Not trying to change the world, but maybe a few hearts. And if that seems to spread around, then I'm okay with that. All right. I'm going to stop flapping my gums and I'm going to read. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Storytime with UndeadPapa. Tonight we return to number 32 Windsor Gardens, to marmalade, mishaps, and the sort of adventures that seem to find one particular bear, wherever he goes. Paddington has a way of turning the ordinary into something unexpected. A camera, a room that needs decorating, a little detective work, or even a simple day out can become an adventure before anyone quite knows what happened. And through it all, there is something wonderfully familiar about coming home to the Browns, to Mr. Gruber, and to a bear who almost always means well. So wherever you're listening from, dim the lights, sit back and relax, because story time is about to begin. And this is More About Paddington by Michael Bond. Chapter 1, A Family Group. The Browns' house at number 32 Windsor Gardens was unusually quiet. It was a warm summer day, and all the family, with the exception of Paddington, who had mysteriously disappeared shortly after lunch, were sitting on the veranda enjoying the afternoon sun. Apart from the faint rustle of paper as Mr. Brown turned the pages of an enormous book and the click of Mrs. Brown's knitting needles, the only sound came from Mrs. Bird, their housekeeper, as she prepared the tea things. Jonathan and Judy were both much too busy piecing together a huge jigsaw puzzle to utter a word. It was Mr. Brown who first broke the silence. "You know," he began, taking a long draw at his pipe, "it's a funny thing, but I've been through this encyclopedia a dozen times, and there's no mention of a bear like Paddington." "Ah, and there won't be," exclaimed Mrs. Bird. "Bears like Paddington are very rare, and a good thing, too, if you ask me, or it would cost us a small fortune in marmalade." Mrs. Bird was always going on about Paddington's fondness for marmalade, but it was noticeable that she was never without a spare jar in the larder in case of emergency. "Anyway, Henry," said Mrs. Brown as she put down her knitting, "why do you want to look up Paddington?" Mr. Brown twirled his mustache thoughtfully. "Oh, no reason in particular," he answered vaguely. "I was interested, that's all." Having a bear in the family was a heavy responsibility, especially a bear like Paddington, and Mr. Brown took the matter very seriously. "The point is," he said, snapping the book shut, "if he's staying with us for good." "If?" There was a chorus of alarm from the rest of the family, not to mention Mrs. Bird. "What on earth do you mean, Henry?" exclaimed Mrs. Brown. "If Paddington is staying with us for good, of course he is." "As he's staying with us," said Mr. Brown hastily, "there are one or two things I have in mind. First of all, I've been thinking of decorating the spare room for him." There was general agreement at this. Ever since he had first arrived in the scene, Paddington had occupied the guest room. Being a polite bear, he had never said anything, even when he'd been turned out to make room for visitors, but it had long been thought he should have a room of his own. "The second thing," continued Mr. Brown, "is a photograph. I think it would be nice if we could have a family group taken." "A photograph?" exclaimed Mrs. Bird. "What a funny thing you should say that." "Oh?" said Mr. Brown. "Why is that?" Mrs. Bird busied herself with the teapot. "You'll see in good time," she said. And try as they might, that was all the others could get from her. Fortunately, she had saved any further questions, for at that moment there came a loud banging noise from the direction of the dining room, and Paddington himself appeared at the French windows. He was struggling with a large cardboard box, across the top of which lay a mysterious-looking metal object with long spikes on the end. But it wasn't so much what he was carrying that caused a gasp of astonishment from the others. It was his general appearance. His fur had an unusually soft, golden look about it, and his ears, or as much of them as they could see, poking out from beneath the wide brim of his old hat, were black and shiny as the tip of his nose. Even his paws and whiskers had to be seen to be believed. Everyone sat up in amazement, and Mr. Brown dropped several stitches. Mrs. Brown dropped several stitches. "Good heavens!" spluttered Mr. Brown, nearly spilling his tea over the encyclopedia. "What have you been doing to yourself?" "I've been having a bath," said Paddington, looking almost offended. "A bath?" repeated Judy slowly. "Without being asked?" "Crikey!" said Jonathan. "We'd better put the flags out." "You're all right?" asked Mr. Brown. "I mean, you're not feeling ill or anything?" Paddington became even more injured at the excitement he had caused. It wasn't as if he had never had a wash. In fact, he had one most mornings. It was simply that he had decided views on baths in particular. Having a bath meant getting his fur wet all over, and it took a long time to dry. "I only wanted to look nice for the photograph," he said firmly. "The photograph?" everyone echoed. It was really uncanny the way Paddington knew about things. "Yes," said Paddington. An important expression came over his face as he bent down and started undoing the string around his cardboard box. "I've bought myself a camera." There was a moment of silence while the Browns watched the back view of Paddington bending over the box. "A camera?" said Mrs. Brown at last. "But aren't they very expensive?" "This one wasn't," said Paddington, breathing hard. He stood up, clutching the biggest camera the Browns had ever seen. "I bought it at a sale in the market. It was only £3. "£3!" exclaimed Mr. Brown, looking most impressed. He turned to the others. "I must say I've never known a bear with such an eye for a bargain as Paddington." "Gosh," said Jonathan. "It's got a hood over your head and everything." "What's that long thing?" asked Judy. "It's a tripod," explained Paddington proudly. He sat down on the floor and began unfolding the legs. "It's to stand the camera on so that it doesn't shake." Mrs. Brown picked up the camera and examined it. Or Mr. Brown picked up the camera and examined it. Holy cow. As he turned it over, some rusty screws and several old nails fell out. "Isn't it rather old?" he asked without thinking. "Looks as if someone's been using it as a workbox instead of a camera." Paddington lifted the brim of his hat and gave Mr. Brown a hard stare. "It's a very rare sort," he replied. "The man in the bargain shop said so." "Well, I think it's super!" exclaimed Jonathan excitedly. "Bags, you take my picture first, Paddington." "I've only got one plate," said Paddington excitedly. "Extra ones cost a lot, and I haven't any pocket money left, so I'm afraid you'll all have to be in one group." "It certainly looks most complicated and rather large for a bear," remarked Mrs. Brown, as Paddington screwed the camera onto the tripod and then adjusted the legs so that they were the right height. "Are you sure you'll be able to work it?" "I think so," said Paddington. His voice became muffled as he disappeared underneath the black hood at the back. "Mr. Gruber lent me a book all about photography, and I've been practicing under the bedclothes." Mr. Gruber, who kept an antique shop in the Portobello Market, was a close friend of Paddington and helped him with all his problems. "Well, in that case," Mr. Brown took charge of the situation, "I suggest we all go onto the lawn and let Paddington take our picture while the sun's shining." And he led the way outside while Paddington bustled around erecting his camera and tripod. In a few moments, Paddington announced that everything was ready, and he began arranging the group as he wanted them, running back to the camera every now and then to peer at them through the lens. Because the camera was so near the ground, he had to put Mr. Brown crouching in a rather uncomfortable position behind Jonathan and Judy, with Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Bird sitting on either side. Although he didn't say anything, Paddington was a bit disappointed with the view through the camera. He could just recognize Mr. Brown because of his mustache, but the others were much more difficult. Everyone seemed blurred, almost as if they were standing in a fog. It was strange, for when he took his head out of the cloth, it was quite sunny outside. The Browns waited patiently while Paddington sat on the grass and consulted his instruction book. Almost at once he discovered a very interesting chapter headed Focus. It explained how if you wanted nice, clear pictures, it was important to make sure the camera was the right distance away and properly adjusted. It even had a picture showing a man measuring the distance with a piece of string. Several minutes went by, for Paddington was rather a slow reader, and there were a number of diagrams to examine. "I hope he's not too long," said Mr. Brown. "I think I've got a cramp coming on." "He'll be disappointed if you move," said Mrs. Brown. "He took such a lot of trouble arranging us all, and it really looks very nice." "That's all very well," grumbled Mr. Brown. "You're sitting down." "Shh," replied Mrs. Brown. "I think he's almost ready now. He's doing something with a piece of string." "What on earth is that for?" asked Mr. Brown. "It's to measure you," said Paddington, tying a loop in the end. "Well, if you don't mind," protested Mr. Brown, when he saw that Paddington was up to. "I'd much rather you tied the other end onto the camera instead of my ear." The rest of his sentence disappeared in a gurgle as Paddington pulled the string tight. Paddington looked rather surprised and examined the knot around Mr. Brown's ear with interest. "I think I must have made a slip knot by mistake," he announced eventually. Paddington was not very good at knots, mainly because having paws made things difficult for him. "Really, Henry," said Mrs. Brown, "don't make such a fuss. Anyone would think you've been hurt." Mr. Brown rubbed his ear, which had gone a funny mauve color. "It's my ear," he said, "and it jolly well does hurt." "Now, where's he going?" exclaimed Mrs. Bird as Paddington hurried off toward the house. "I expect he's gone to measure the string." "Huh?" said Mr. Brown. "Well, I'm going to stand up." "Henry," said Mrs. Brown, "if you do, I shall be very cross." "It's too late anyway," groaned Mr. Brown. "My leg's gone to sleep." Luckily for Mr. Brown, Paddington arrived back at that moment. He stared hard at the sun and then at the waiting group. "I'm afraid you'll have to come over here," he said after consulting his instruction book. "The sun's moved." "I'm not surprised," grumbled Mr. Brown as he sat on the lawn rubbing his leg. "At any rate, at the rate we're going, it will have set before we're finished." "I never realized having a picture taken could be so complicated," said Mrs. Bird. "What I'm not sure about," whispered Judy, "is why Paddington bothered having a bath if he's taking the photograph." "That's a point," said Mr. Brown. "How are you going to be in the picture, Paddington?" Paddington gave Mr. Brown a strange look. That was something he hadn't thought of either, but he decided to meet that difficulty when it came. He had a lot of other important things to do first. "I'm going to press the shutter," he said after a moment's thought, "and then run round the other side." "But even bears can't run that fast," persisted Mr. Brown. "I'm sure Paddington knows best, Henry," whispered Mrs. Brown. "And even if he doesn't, for goodness sake, don't say anything. If he finds out he's had a bath for nothing, we shall never hear the last of it." "Seems like a very long hood," said Mrs. Bird, looking towards the camera. "I can't see Paddington at all." "That's because he's small," explained Jonathan. "He's had to lower the tripod." The Browns sat very still with a fixed smile on their faces as Paddington came out from beneath his hood. He made some complicated adjustments to the front of the camera, then, after announcing he was about to fit the photographic plate, disappeared again. Suddenly, to everyone's surprise, the camera and tripod began to rock backwards and forwards in a most dangerous manner. "Oh, good gracious!" exclaimed Mrs. Bird. "Whatever's happening now?" "Look out!" shouted Mr. Brown. "It's coming towards us!" They all stood up and moved away, staring with wide-open eyes at the camera as it followed them. But when it got to within several feet, it suddenly stopped, then turned left and headed towards a rose bush. "I do hope he's all right," said Mrs. Brown anxiously. "I wonder if we ought to do anything," said Mrs. Bird, as there was a muffled cry from Paddington. But before anyone could reply, the camera rebounded from the rosebush and shot back across the lawn. It went twice round the pond in the middle, then jumped up in the air several times before toppling over to land with a dull thud in the middle of Mr. Brown's best flower bed. "Good heavens!" shouted Mr. Brown as he rushed forward. "My petunias!" "Never mind your petunias, Henry," exclaimed Mrs. Brown. "What about Paddington?" "Well, no wonder," said Mr. Brown as he bent down and lifted the hood. "He's got his head stuck inside the camera." "I should be careful, Dad," said Jonathan as Mr. Brown began pulling at Paddington's legs. "His whiskers might be caught in the shutter." Mr. Brown stopped pulling and crawled round to peer through the lens. "I can't see anything," he said after a moment's pause. "It's all dark inside." He tapped the case, and there came another faint cry from within. "Butter!" said Mrs. Bird, hurrying towards the kitchen. "There's nothing like butter when anyone's stuck." Mrs. Bird was a great believer in butter. She had used it several times in the past when Paddington had got himself stuck. All the same, even when Jonathan holding one end and Mr. Brown pulling on the other, it seemed some while before Paddington's head finally came away from the camera. He sat on the grass, rubbing his ears and looking very crestfallen. Things hadn't gone at all according to plan. "I vote," said Mr. Brown, when order had finally been restored. What the hell was going on? "I vote," said Mr. Brown, when order had finally been restored, "that we set everything up exactly as it was before and tie a string to the shutter. Then Paddington can sit in the group with us and work it from a distance. It'll be much safer that way." Everyone agreed that this was a good idea, and while Mr. Brown arranged the group once again, Paddington busied himself setting up his camera and fitting the photographic plate inside it, making sure to stand well back this time. There was a slight setback when he pulled the string too hard and the tripod fell over, but finally the big moment arrived. There was a click from the camera, and everyone relaxed. The man in the photographic shop looked almost surprised when Mrs. Bird and all the Browns and Paddington trooped through the door a little later. "Certainly a very rare sort," he said, examining Paddington's camera with interest. "Very rare. I've read about them, of course, but I've never actually seen one before. It must have been kept in a pantry or something. Seems to have a lot of butter inside it." "I had a bit of an accident when I tried to put the plate in," said Paddington. "We're all very anxious to see the result of the photograph," added Mr. Brown hastily. "We were wondering if you could do it for us while we wait." The man said he would be only too pleased to oblige. From all he had seen and heard, he was quite eager to see the picture, and he hurried off to his dark room, leaving the Browns alone in the shop. He couldn't remember ever having a young bear photographer in the shop before. When he returned, there was a puzzled expression on his face. "You did say you took this picture today?" he asked through the window at the bright sunshine. "That's right," said Paddington, eyeing him suspiciously. "Well, sir," the man held the plate up to the light for Paddington to see. "It's nice and sharp, and I can clearly see you all, but it looks as if it was foggy at the time, and these patches of light, like moonbeams, they're very odd." Paddington took the plate from the man and examined it carefully. "I suspect that's where I had my torch under the bedclothes," he said at last. "Well, I think it's a very nice picture for a first attempt," said Mrs. Bird. "And I'd like 6 postcard prints, please. I'm sure Paddington's Aunt Lucy in Peru would love one. She lives in a home for retired bears in Lima," she added, for the benefit of the shopkeeper. "Does she?" said the man, looking most impressed. "Well, it's the first time I've ever had any pictures sent overseas, especially to a home for retired bears in Peru." He thought for a moment. "I'll tell you what," he said. "If I could borrow this camera for a week to put in my shop window, I'll not only do all the prints you want, but I'll take a photograph of each of you into the bargain. How's that?" "I might have known," said Mr. Brown as they were walking home, "that if Paddington took our photograph, something odd would happen. Fancy getting all these pictures for nothing." "Bears always fall on their feet," said Mrs. Bird, looking at Paddington. But Paddington wasn't listening. He was still thinking about his camera. Early next morning he hurried down to the shop and was pleased to see it already occupied a position of honor in the middle of the window. Underneath it was a notice that said, "A very rare type of early camera now owned by Mr. Paddington Brown, a young local bear gentleman." But Paddington was even more pleased by another notice next to it which said, "An example of his work," and underneath that was his picture. It was a little blurred, and there were several paw marks near the edge, but 1 or 2 people in the neighborhood came up and congratulated him, and several of them said they could quite clearly recognize everyone in it. All in all, Paddington thought it had been a very good £3 worth. glad you guys are enjoying it. I am certainly enjoying reading it. Chapter 2. A Spot of Decorating. Oh, yeah, my mouth is a little dry today. Paddington gave a deep sigh and pulled his hat down over his ears in an effort to keep out the noise. There was such a hullabaloo going on, it was difficult to write up the notes in his scrapbook. The excitement had all started when Mr. and Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Bird received an unexpected invitation to a wedding. Luckily, both Jonathan and Judy were out for the day, or things might have been far worse. Paddington hadn't been included in the invitation, but he didn't really mind. He didn't like weddings very much. Apart from the free cake, he had been promised a piece of whatever piece of that, whether he went or not. All the same, he was beginning to wish everyone would hurry up and go. He had a special reason for wanting to be alone that day. He sighed again, wiping the pen carefully on the back of his paw, and then mopped up some ink blots which somehow or other had found their way onto the table. He was only just in time, for at that moment the door burst open and Mrs. Brown rushed in. "Ah, there you are, Paddington." She stopped short in the middle of the room and stared at him. "Why on earth are you wearing your hat indoors?" she asked. "And why is your tongue all blue?" Paddington stuck out his tongue as far as he could. "It's a funny color," he admitted, squinting down at it with interest. "Perhaps I'm sickening for something." "You'll be sickening of something all right if you don't clear up this mess," grumbled Mrs. Bird as she entered. "Just to look at it, bottles of ink, glue, bits of paper, my best sewing scissors, marmalade all over the table runner, and goodness knows what else." Paddington looked round. It was in a bit of a state. "I've almost finished," he announced. "I've just got to rule out a few more lines and things. I've been writing my memories." Paddington took his scrapbook seriously and spent long hours carefully pasting in pictures and writing up his adventures. Since he'd been at the Browns so much, I'm not tired, I swear. Since he had been at the Browns, so much had happened. It was now more than half full. "Well, make sure you do clear everything up," said Mrs. Brown, "or we shan't bring you back any cake. Now, do take care of yourself, and don't forget, when the baker comes, we want 2 loaves." With that, she waved goodbye and followed Mrs. Bird out of the room. "You know," said Mrs. Bird as she stepped into the car, "I have a feeling that bear has something up his paw. He seemed most anxious for us to leave." "Oh, I don't know," said Mrs. Brown. "I don't see what he can do. We shan't be away all that long." "Ah," replied Mrs. Bird darkly, "that's a maybe. That's as may be. But he's been hanging about in the landing upstairs half the morning. I'm sure he's up to something." Mr. Brown, who didn't like weddings much either, and was secretly wishing he could stay at home with Paddington, looked over his shoulder as he let in the clutch. "Perhaps I ought to stay as well," he said. "Then I could get on with decorating his new room." "Now, Henry," said Mrs. Brown firmly, "you're coming to the wedding, and that's that. Paddington will be quite all right by himself. He's a very capable bear, and as for you wanting to get on with decorating his new room, you haven't done a thing towards it over a fortnight, so I'm sure it can wait another day." Paddington's new room had become a sore point in the Brown household. It was over 2 weeks since Mr. Brown had first thought of doing it. So far, he had stripped all the old wallpaper from the walls, removed the picture rails, the wood round the doors and door handle, and everything else that was loose, or that he made loose, and bought a lot of bright new wallpaper, some whitewash, and some paint. There, matters had rested. In the back of the car, Mrs. Bird pretended she hadn't heard a thing. An idea had suddenly came into her mind, and she was hoping it hadn't entered Paddington's as well. But Mrs. Bird knew the workings of Paddington's mind better than most, and she feared the worst. Had she but known, her fears were being realized at that very moment. Paddington was busy scratching out the words, at a loose end, in his scrapbook, and was adding in large capital letters the ominous ones, decorating my new room. It was while he had been writing at a loose end in his scrapbook earlier in the day that the idea had come to him. Paddington had noticed in the past that he often got his best ideas when he was at a loose end. For a long while, all his belongings had been packed away, ready for the big move to his new room, and he was beginning to get impatient. Every time he wanted anything special, he had to undo yards of string and brown paper. Having underlined the words in red, Paddington cleared everything up, locked his scrapbook carefully in his suitcase, and hurried upstairs. He had several times offered to lend a paw with the decorating, but for some reason or other Mr. Brown had put his foot down on the idea and hadn't even allowed him in the room while work was in progress. Paddington couldn't quite understand why. He was sure he would be very good at it. The room in question was an old box room, which had been out of use for a number of years, and when he entered it, Paddington found it was even more interesting than he had expected. He closed the door carefully behind him and sniffled. There was an exciting smell of paint and whitewash in the air. Not only that, but there were some steps, a trestle table, several bushes, a number of rolls of wallpaper, and a big pail of whitewash. The room had a lovely echo as well, and he spent a long time sitting in the middle of the floor while he was stirring the paint, just listening to his new voice. There were so many different and interesting things around that it was a job to know what to do first. Eventually, Paddington decided on the painting. Choosing one of Mr. Brown's best brushes, he dipped it into the pot of paint and then looked round the room for something to dab it on. It wasn't until he had been working on the window frame for several minutes that he began to wish he had started on something else. The brush made his arm ache, and when he tried dipping his paw in the paint pot instead and rubbing it on, more paint seems to go onto the glass than the wooden part, so that the room became quite dark. "Perhaps," said Paddington, waving the brush in the air and addressing the room in general, "perhaps if I do the ceiling first with the whitewash, I can cover all the drips on the wall with the wallpaper." But when Paddington started work on the whitewashing, he found it was almost as hard as painting. Even by standing on the tiptoe at the very top of the steps, he had a job to reach the ceiling. The bucket of whitewash was much too heavy for him to lift, so that he had to come down the steps every time in order to dip the brush. And when he carried the brush up again, the whitewash ran down his paw and made his fur all matted. Looking around him, Paddington began to wish he was still at a loose end. Things were beginning to get in rather a mess again. He felt sure Mrs. Bird would have something to say when she saw it. It was then that he had a brainwave. Paddington was a resourceful bear, and he didn't like being beaten by things. Recently, he had become interested in a house which was being built nearby. He had first seen it from the window of his bedroom, and since then he'd spent many hours talking to the men and watching while they hoisted their tools and cement up to the top floor by means of a rope and pulley. Once Mr. Briggs, the foreman, had even taken him up in the bucket too, and had let him lay several bricks. Now the Browns' house was an old one, and in the middle of the ceiling there was a large hook where a big lamp had once hung. Not only that, but in one corner of the room there was a thin coil of rope as well. Paddington set to work quickly. First he tied one end of the rope to the handle of the bucket, then he climbed up the steps and passed the other end through the hook in the ceiling. Even so, when he had climbed down again, it still took him a long time to pull the bucket anywhere near the top of the steps. It was full to the brim with whitewash and very heavy, so that he had to stop every few inches and tie the other end of the rope to the steps for safety. It was when he undid the rope for the last time that things started to go wrong. As Paddington closed his eyes and leaned back for the final pull, he suddenly felt to his surprise as if he was floating in air. It was a most strange feeling. He reached out one foot and waved it around. There was definitely nothing there. He opened one eye and then nearly let go of the rope in astonishment as he saw the bucket of whitewash going past him on its way down. Suddenly, everything seemed to happen at once. Before he could even reach out a paw and shout for help, his head hit the ceiling, and there was a clang as the bucket hit the floor. For a few seconds, Paddington clung there, kicking the air and not knowing what to do. Then there was a gurgling sound from below. Looking down, he saw to his horror that all the whitewash was running out of the bucket. He felt the rope began to move again as the bucket got lighter, and then it shot past him again as he descended to land with a bump in the middle of a sea of whitewash. Even then, his troubles weren't over. As he tried to regain his balance on the slippery floor, he let go of the rope, and with a rushing noise, the bucket shot downwards and again landed on top of his head, completely covering him. Paddington lay on his back in the whitewash for several minutes, trying to get his breath back and wondering what had hit him. When he did sit up and take the bucket off his head, he quickly put it back on again. There was whitewash all over the floor. The paint pots had been upset into little rivers of green and brown, and Mr. Brown's decorating cap was floating in one corner of the room. When Paddington saw it, he felt very glad he'd left his hat downstairs. One thing was certain. He was going to have a lot of explaining to do. And that was going to be even more difficult than usual, because he couldn't even explain to himself quite what had gone wrong. It was some while later, when he was sitting on the upturned bucket, thinking about things, that the idea of doing the wallpapering came to him. Paddington had a hopeful nature, and he believed in looking on the bright side. If he did the wallpapering really well, the others might not even notice the mess he made. Paddington was fairly confident about the wallpapering. Unknown to Mr. Brown, he had often watched him in the past through a crack in the door, and it looked quite simple. All you had to do was brush some sticky stuff on the back of the paper, then put it on the wall. The high parts weren't too difficult, even for a bear, because you could fold the paper in two and put a broom on the end of it where the fold was. Then you simply push the broom up and down the wall in case there were any nasty wrinkles. Paddington felt much more cheerful now. He'd thought of the wallpapering. He found some paste already mixed in another bucket, which he put on top of the trestle while he unrolled the paper. It was a little difficult at first because every time he tried to unroll the paper, he had to crawl along the trestle, pushing it with his paws, and the other end rolled up again and followed behind him. But eventually he managed to get one piece completely covered in paste. He climbed down off the trestle, carefully avoiding the worst of the whitewash, which by now was beginning to dry in large lumps, and lifted the sheet of wallpaper onto a broom. It was a long sheet of paper, much longer than it had seemed when he was putting the paste on, and somehow or other, as Paddington waved the broom about over his head, it began to wrap itself around him. After a struggle, he managed to push his way out and headed in the general direction of a piece of wall. He stood back and surveyed the result. The paper was torn in several places, and there seemed to be a lot of paste on the outside. But Paddington felt quite pleased with himself. He decided to try another piece, then another, running backwards and forwards between the trestle and the walls as fast as his legs could carry him, in an effort to get it all finished before the Browns returned. Some of the pieces didn't quite join. Others overlapped, and on most of them were some very odd patches of paste and whitewash. None of the pieces were as straight as he would have liked, but when he put his head on one side and squinted, Paddington felt the overall effect was quite nice, and he felt very pleased with himself. It was as he was taking a final look around the room at his handiwork that he noticed something very strange. There was a window, and there was also a fireplace, but there was no longer any sign of a door. Paddington stopped squinting, and his eyes grew rounder and rounder. He distinctly remembered there had been a door, because he had come through it. He blinked at all four walls. It was difficult to see properly because the paint on the window glass had started to dry, and there was hardly any light coming through. But there most definitely wasn't a door. "I can't understand it," said Mr. Brown as he entered the dining room. "I've looked everywhere, and there's no sign of Paddington. I told you I should have stayed at home with him." Mrs. Brown looked worried. "Oh, dear, I hope nothing's happened to him. It's so unlike him to go out without leaving a note." "He's not in his room," said Judy. "Mr. Gruber hasn't seen him either," added Jonathan. "I've just been down to the market, and he says he hasn't seen him since they had cocoa together this morning." "Have you seen Paddington anywhere?" asked Mrs. Brown as Mrs. Bird entered carrying a tray of supper things. "I don't know about Paddington," said Mrs. Bird. "I've been having enough trouble over the water pipes without missing bears. I think they've got an airlock or something. They've been banging away ever since we came in." Mr. Brown listened for a moment. "It does sound like water pipes," he said. "And yet it isn't regular enough somehow." He went outside into the hall. "It's a sort of thumping noise." "Crikey!" shouted Jonathan. "Listen! It's someone sending an SOS." Everyone exchanged glances, and then, in one voice, cried, "Paddington!" "Mercy me!" said Mrs. Bird as they burst through the papered-up door. "There must have been an earthquake or something, and either that's Paddington or it's his ghost." She pointed towards a small white figure as it rose from an upturned bucket to greet them. "I couldn't find the door," said Paddington plaintively. "I think I must have papered it over when I did the decorating. It was there when I came in. I remember seeing it, so I banged on the floor with a broom handle." "Gosh," said Jonathan admiringly. "What a mess!" "You papered it over when you did the decorating," repeated Mr. Brown. He was a bit slow to grasp things sometimes. "That's right," said Paddington. "I did it as a surprise." He waved a paw around the room. "I'm afraid it's a bit of a mess, but it isn't dry yet." While the idea was slowly sinking into Mr. Brown's mind, Mrs. Bird came to Paddington's rescue. "Now, it's not a bit of good holding an inquest," she said. "What's done is done. If you ask me, it's a good thing, too. Now, perhaps we shall get some proper decorators in to do the job." With that, she took hold of Paddington's paw and led him out of the room. "As for you, young bear, you're going straight into a hot bath before all that plaster and stuff sets hard." Mr. Brown looked after the retreating figures of Mrs. Bird and Paddington, and then at the long trail of white footprints and paw marks. "Bears," he said bitterly. Paddington hung about in his room for a long time after his bath and waited until the last possible minute before going downstairs to supper. He had a nasty feeling he was in disgrace, but surprisingly the word decorating wasn't mentioned at all that evening. Even more surprisingly, while he was sitting up in bed drinking his cocoa, several people came to see him, and each of them gave him 10 pence. It was all very mysterious, but Paddington didn't like to ask why in case they changed their minds. It was Judy who solved the problem for him when she came in to say good night. "I expect Mummy and Mrs. Bird gave you 10 pence because they don't want Daddy to do any more decorating," she explained. "He always starts things and never finishes them. And I expect Daddy gave you one because he didn't want to finish it anyway. And now they're paying a proper decorator in. Everyone's so happy." Paddington sipped his cocoa thoughtfully. "Perhaps if I did another room, I'd get another 30 pence, he said. "Oh, no you don't," said Judy sternly. "You've done quite enough for one day. If I were you, I shouldn't mention the word decorating for a long time." "Perhaps you're right," said Paddington sleepily as he stretched out his paws. "But I was at a loose end." All righty then. Chapter 3. Paddington Turns Detective. The old box room was finished at last, and everyone, including Paddington, agreed that he was a very lucky bear to move into such a nice room. Not only was the paintwork a gleaming white so that he could almost see his face in it, but the walls were gaily papered, and he even had new furniture of his own. "In for a penny, in for a pound," said Mr. Brown, and he had bought Paddington a brand new bed with special short legs, a spring mattress, and a cupboard for his odds and ends. There were several other pieces of furniture, and Mrs. Brown had been extravagant and bought a thick pile carpet for the floor. Paddington was very proud of his carpet, and he carefully spread some old newspapers over the parts where he walked so that his paws wouldn't make it dirty. Mrs. Bird's contribution had been some bright new curtains for the windows, which Paddington liked very much. In fact, the first night he spent in his new room, he couldn't make up his mind whether he wanted to have them drawn together so that he could admire them. Excuse me. Or left apart so he could see the view. He got out of bed several times and eventually decided to have one drawn and the other back so that he could have the best of both worlds. Then something strange caught his eye. Paddington made a point of keeping a torch by the side of his bed in case there was an emergency during the night, and it was while he was flashing it on and off to admire the drawn curtain that he noticed it. Each time he flashed the torch, there was an answering flicker, a light from somewhere outside. He sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes, and stared in the direction of the window. He decided to try a more complicated signal. 2 short flashes followed by several long ones. When he did so, he nearly fell out of bed with surprise. For each time he sent a signal, it was repeated in exactly the same way through the glass. Paddington jumped out of bed and rushed to the window. He stayed there for a while peering out at the garden. But he couldn't see anything at all. Having made sure the window was tightly shut, he drew both curtains and hurried back to bed, pulling the clothes over his head a little farther than usual. It was all very mysterious, and Paddington didn't believe in taking chances. It was Mr. Brown, at breakfast next morning, who gave him his first clue. "Someone's stolen my prize marrow," he announced crossly. "They must have got in during the night." For some weeks past, Mr. Brown had been carefully nursing a huge marrow which he intended to enter for a vegetable show. He watered it morning and evening and measured it every night before going to bed. Mrs. Brown exchanged a glance with Mrs. Bird. "Never mind, dear," she said. "You've got several others almost as good." "I do mind," grumbled Mr. Brown. "And the others will never be as good, not in time for the show." "Perhaps it was one of the other competitors, Dad," said Jonathan. "Perhaps they didn't want you to win. It was a jolly good marrow." "That's quite possible," said Mr. Brown, looking more pleased at the thought. "I've got a good mind to offer a small reward." Mrs. Bird hastily poured out some more tea. Both she and Mrs. Brown appeared anxious to change the subject, but Paddington pricked up his ears at the mention of a reward. As he had finished his toast and marmalade, he asked to be excused and disappeared upstairs without even having a third cup of tea. It was while she was helping Mrs. Bird with the washing up that Mrs. Brown first noticed something odd going on in the garden. "Look!" she said, nearly dropping one of the breakfast plates in her astonishment. "Behind the cabbage patch. Whatever is it?" Mrs. Bird followed her gaze out of the window, where something brown and shapeless kept bobbing up and down. Her face cleared. "It's Paddington. I'd recognize his hat anywhere." "Paddington?" echoed Mrs. Brown. But what on earth is he doing crawling about in the cabbage patch on his paws and knees? He, he looks as if he's lost something, said Mrs. Bird. That's Mr. Brown's magnifying glass he's got. Mrs. Brown sighed. Oh, well, we shall know what it is soon enough, I expect. Unaware of the interest he was causing, Paddington sat down behind a raspberry cane and undid a small notebook which he opened to a page marked List of Clues. Recently, Paddington had been reading a mystery story which Mr. Gruber had lent him, and he had begun to fancy himself as a detective. The mysterious flashes of the night before and the loss of Mr. Brown's marrow convinced him his opportunity had come at last. So far it had all been rather disappointing. He had found several footprints, but he traced them all back to the house. In the big gap left by Mr. Brown's prize marrow there were 2 dead beetles and an empty seed packet. But that was all. All the same, Paddington wrote the details carefully in his notebook and drew a map of the garden. Putting a large X to mark the spot where the marrow had once been, then he went back upstairs to his room in order to think things out. When he got there, he made another addition to his map, a drawing of the new house which was being built beyond the edge of the garden. Paddington decided that was where the mysterious flashes must have come from the night before. He stared at it through his opera glasses for some time, but the only people he could see were the builders. Shortly afterwards, anyone watching the Browns' house would have seen the small figure of a bear emerge from the front door and make its way toward the market. Fortunately for Paddington's plans, no one saw him leave, nor did anyone see him when he returned some while later, carrying a large parcel in his arms. There was an excited gleam in his eyes as he crept back up the stairs and entered his bedroom, carefully locking the door behind him. Paddington liked parcels, and this one was particularly interesting. It took him a long time to undo the knots on the string because his paws were trembling with excitement, but when he did pull the paper apart, it revealed a long cardboard box, very brightly colored, with the words Master Detective's Outfit on the side. Paddington had been having a battle with himself ever since he'd first seen it several days before in the shop window. Although £7 seemed an awful lot of money to pay for anything, especially when you only get £1 a week pocket money, Paddington felt very pleased with himself as he emptied the contents onto the floor. There was a long black beard, some dark glasses, a police whistle, several bottles of chemical marked "Handle with Care," which Paddington hurriedly put back in the box, a fingerprint pad, a small bottle of invisible ink, and a book of instructions. It seemed a very good disguise outfit. Paddington tried writing his name on the lid of the box with the invisible ink, and he couldn't see it at all. Then he tested the fingerprint pad with his paw and blew several blasts on the police whistle under the bedclothes. He rather wished he'd thought of doing it the other way round, as a lot of the ink came off on the sheets, which was going to be difficult to explain. But he liked the beard best of all. It had 2 pieces of wire for fitting over the ears, and when he turned and suddenly caught sight of himself in the mirror, it quite made him jump. With his hat on and an old raincoat of Jonathan's which Mrs. Brown had put out for the jumble sale, he could hardly recognize himself. After studying the effect in the mirror from all possible angles, Paddington decided to try it out downstairs. It was difficult to walk properly. Jonathan's old coat was too long for him, and he kept treading on it. Apart from that, his ears didn't seem to fit the beard as well as he would have liked, so that he had to hang on to it with one paw while he went backwards down the stairs, holding on to the banisters with the other paw. He was so intent on what he was doing that he didn't hear Mrs. Bird coming up until she was right on top of him. Mrs. Bird looked most startled when she bumped into him. "Oh, Paddington," she began. "I was just coming to see you. I wonder if you would mind going down to the market for me and fetching a half-pound of butter." "I'm not Paddington," said a gruff voice from behind the beard. "I'm Sherlock Holmes, the famous detective." "Yes, dear," said Mrs. Bird, "but don't forget the butter. We need it for lunch." With that, she turned and went back down the stairs toward the kitchen. The door shut behind her, and Paddington heard the murmur of voices. He pulled off the beard disappointedly. 35 buns worth, he said bitterly to no one in particular. He almost felt like going back to the shop and asking for his money back. 35 buns were still 35 buns, and it had taken him a long time to save that much money. But when he got outside the front door, Paddington hesitated. It seemed such a pity to waste his disguise. And even if Mrs. Bird had seen through it, Mr. Briggs, the foreman at the building site, might not. Paddington decided to have one more try. He might even pick up some more clues. By the time he arrived at the new house, he was feeling much more pleased with himself. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed quite a number of people staring at him as he passed. And when he looked at them over the top of his glasses, several of them had hurriedly crossed to the other side of the road. He crept along outside the house until he heard certain voices. They seemed to be coming from an open window on the first floor, and he distinctly recognized Mr. Briggs' voice among them. There was a ladder propped against the wall, and Paddington clambered up the rungs until his head was level with the windowsill. Then he carefully peered over the edge. Mr. Briggs and his men were busy round a small stove making themselves a cup of tea. Paddington stared hard at Mr. Briggs, who was in the act of pouring some water into a teapot. Then, after adjusting his beard, he blew a long blast on his police whistle. There was a crash of breaking china as Mr. Briggs jumped up. He pointed a trembling hand in the direction of the window. "Caw!" he shouted. "Look, an apparition!" The others followed his gaze with open mouths. Paddington stayed just long enough to see 4 white faces staring at him, and then he slid down the ladder on all 4 paws and hid behind a pile of rocks. Almost immediately, there was the sound of excited voices at the window. "Can't see it now," said a voice. "Must have vanished." "Caw!" explained Mr. Briggs, mopping his brow with a spotted handkerchief. "Whoever it was, I don't ever want to see nothing like it again. Fear chilled me to the marrow, it did." With that, he slammed the window and let the voices die away. From behind the pile of bricks, Paddington could hardly believe his ears. He had never even dreamed that Mr. Briggs and his men could be mixed up in the affair. And yet, he had definitely heard Mr. Briggs say his marrow had been chilled. After removing his beard and dark glasses, Paddington sat down behind the bricks and made several notes in his notebook. with the invisible ink. Then he made his way slowly and thoughtfully in the direction of the grocer's. It had been a very good day's detecting, and Paddington decided he would have to pay another visit to the building site when all was quiet. It was midnight. All the household had long since gone to bed. "You know," said Mrs. Brown, just as the clock was striking 12, "it's a funny thing, but I'm sure Paddington's up to something." "There's nothing funny in that," replied Mr. Brown sleepily. "He's always up to something. What is it this time?" "Well, that's just the trouble," said Mrs. Brown. "I don't really know. But he was wandering round wearing a false beard this morning. He nearly startled poor Mrs. Bird out of her wits. He's been writing things in his notebook all the evening too. And do you know what?" "No," said Mr. Brown, stifling a yawn. "What?" "When I looked over his shoulder, there was nothing there." "Well, bears will be bears," said Mr. Brown. He paused for a moment as he reached up to turn off the light. "That's strange," he said. "I could have sworn I heard a police whistle just then." "Nonsense, Henry," said Mrs. Brown. "You must be dreaming." Mr. Brown shrugged his shoulders as he turned out the light. He was much too tired to argue. All the same, he knew he had heard a whistle, but as he closed his eyes and prepared himself for sleep, it never crossed his mind that the cause of it might be Paddington. Lots of things had been happening to Paddington since he crept out of the Browns' house under cover of darkness and made his way round to the building site. So many things had happened, one after the other, that he almost wished he'd never decided to be a detective in the first place. He felt very glad when, in answer to several loud blasts on his whistle, a large black car drew up at the side of the road and 2 men in uniform got out. "Hello? Hello?" said the first of the men, looking hard at Paddington. "What's going on there?" Paddington pointed a paw dramatically in the direction of the new house. "I've captured a burglar," he announced. "A what?" asked the second policeman, peering at Paddington. He came across some very strange things in the course of duty, but he'd never been called out in the middle of the night by a young bear before. This one seemed to be wearing a long black beard and a duffel coat. It was most unusual. "A burglar," repeated Paddington. "I think he's the one that took Mr. Brown's marrow." "Mr. Brown's marrow?" he repeated the first policeman, looking rather dazed as he followed Paddington through his secret entrance into the house. "That's right," said Paddington. "Now he's got my marmalade sandwiches. I took a big parcel of them inside with me in case I got hungry while I was waiting." "Of course," said the second policeman, trying to humor Paddington. "Marmalade sandwiches." He tapped his forehead as he looked at his colleague. "And where's the burglar now? Eating your sandwiches?" "I expect so," said Paddington. "I shut him in the room and put a piece of wood under the door so that he couldn't get out. I got my beard caught in one of the sandwiches, so I switched my torch on to make some of the hairs out of the marmalade, and then it happened." "What happened?" chorused the policeman. They were finding it rather difficult to keep up with Paddington's description of the course of events. "I saw someone flashing a light outside the window," explained Paddington as patiently as he could. "Then I heard footsteps coming up the stairs, so I lay in wait." He pointed towards a door at the top of the stairs. He's in there." Before another policeman could ask any more questions, there came a sound of banging, and a voice cried, "Let me out!" "Good heavens!" exclaimed the first policeman. "There's someone in there." He looked at Paddington with renewed respect. "Did you get a description, sir?" "He was about 8 feet tall," said Paddington recklessly, "and he sounded very cross when he found he couldn't get out." The second policeman said. "Well, we'll just have to see about that. Stand back." With that, he pulled the piece of wood from under the door and flung it open, shining his torch into the room. Everyone stood back and waited for the worst to happen. To their surprise, when the man came out, it was another policeman. "Locked in!" he exclaimed bitterly. "I see some lights flashing from an empty house, so I go investigate. And what happens? I'm locked in by a bear." He pointed towards Paddington. "And if I'm not mistaken, that's him." Paddington suddenly began to feel very small. All 3 policemen were looking at him, and in the excitement his beard had fallen off one ear. Said the first policeman. "What were you doing in an empty house?" "At gone midnight, young Follow-me-Bear." "And wearing a disguise at that. I can see we shall have to take you along to the station for questioning." "It's a bit difficult to explain," said Paddington sadly. "I'm afraid it's going to take rather a long time. You see, it's all to do with Mr. Brown's marrow, the one he was going to enter for the vegetable show." The policemen weren't the only ones who found it all rather hard to understand. Mr. Brown was still asking questions long after Paddington had been returned from the station to the family's safekeeping. "I still don't know how losing my marrow got anything to do with Paddington being arrested," he said for the 100th time. "But Paddington wasn't arrested, Henry," said Mrs. Brown. "He was only detained for questioning. Anyway, he was only trying to get your marrow back for you. You ought to be very grateful." She sighed. She would have to tell her husband the truth sooner or later. She'd already told Paddington. "I'm afraid it's my fault, really," she said. "You see, I cut down your marrow by mistake." "You did?" exclaimed Mr. Brown. "You cut my prize marrow?" "Well, I didn't realize it was your prize marrow," said Mrs. Brown. "And you know how fond you are of stuffed marrow. We had it for dinner last night." Back in his own room, Paddington left quite pleased with himself as he got into bed. He'd have a lot to tell his friend Mr. Gruber in the morning. Once the inspector at the police station had heard his full story, he had complimented Paddington on his bravery and ordered his immediate release. "I wish there were more bears like you, Mr. Brown," he had said. And he had given Paddington a real police whistle as a souvenir. Even if the policeman who had been locked in said he quite understood how it all had come about. Besides, he had solved the mystery of the flashing lights, at least. It hadn't been anyone in the garden at all, but simply the reflection of his own torch on the window. When he stood up on the end of the bed, he couldn't even see himself quite plainly in the glass. He could even see himself. In a way, Paddington was sorry about the marrow, especially as he wouldn't get the reward. But he was very glad the culprit hadn't been Mr. Briggs. He liked Mr. Briggs. And besides, he'd been promised another ride in his bucket. He didn't want to miss that. Oh, 51,000 likes. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate that. Well, that is where we're going to stop tonight. It is now 11 o'clock. We will be back. Oh, my Batman shirt? Yeah. Love me my Batman shirt. This Batman shirt is older than my daughter. My oldest daughter is like 25 years old. It's crazy. We will pick up again at chapter 4 and go right straight through to the end of the book. I appreciate you guys staying with me for a couple of hours tonight and dealing with some of the technical difficulties and the little craziness. I appreciate you all over on the tubes for watching and keeping up with me. Yeah. So we will be back again at this tomorrow. And that's where we leave our story for tonight, with Paddington a little wiser and somehow still finding himself in the middle of an adventure. Thank you all for spending a little time with me tonight. No, the picture books will be coming up this Sunday. This coming Sunday. Next Sunday. Week from today. So join me tomorrow night as we return to number 32 Windsor Gardens for the conclusion of More About Paddington by Michael Bond. Miss Maple Seeds. I was not, but I hadn't really looked yet. So let me write that down real quick so I don't forget, because that'll be next Sunday, we'll be doing the picture books. Okay. But I will definitely grab that one. And it was Sophia, is that correct? Awesome. Got to make sure I make note of which of the kids, because there will be several, which of the kids requested which books. All right. Well, if you enjoy these stories and would like to help support what I do here, please consider becoming a super fan. You can also make a one-time donation at the links in my bio with the Cash App and the Venmo and the PayPals and the Pals of Pay. If you want to do that, or you can go visit the UndeadPapa Mercantile and pick yourself. I can't talk tonight. Pick yourself up some UndeadPapa merchandise. Every bit of support keeps the campfire lit. And whether you go and purchase something or become a fan or don't, the fact that you're here is appreciated either way. So until tomorrow night, please be kind to each other and be kind to yourself. Oh, Ray, that's awesome. Please be kind to each other and please be kind to yourself, because kindness matters. And so do you. Good night, everybody. And good night over on the tubes. I appreciate you guys coming in and hanging out and listening.